I'm Greg Freeberry, your host. Today we got a very special guest all the way from Australia. Lili-Ann Kriegler is an education consultant and the author of Edu-Chameleon, which is all about how to maximize learning and understanding in your child at the various stages of their life. And Lily's coming on the show today to share about how you can communicate with your kids at each particular stage of their life to really maximize your bonding and relationships with your kids at, all the way from infancy to being a teenager. So if you have any kid in that range, then you probably want to stick around. And as always, if you want more education tips and hacks, you can visit my site at think&evolve.academy, or you can check out my Instagram at think.and.evolve, where I'm posting more reels and infographics and stuff like that on education and mindset to really maximize your kids' learning success and academic success. So this is a long conversation today, so I don't want to spend too much time on the intro. Let's just get straight to Lili-Ann.
Hello and welcome to Pandemic Parenting. I am your host, Greg Freeberry, and today we have a very amazing guest, Lili-Ann Kriegler, and she is an education consultant and an author. So Lili-Ann, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you so much for hosting me all the way from Australia.
Yeah, this is a big time. It's actually Friday where you're at, Friday morning, right? So yeah, it's still Thursday here in LA, but that's amazing that we can even do this over the internet. That's the power.
It's true.
So normally I like to just start off the show just asking you a few kind of rapid fire personal questions, just so everyone can kind of get to know you and we can relax into the session a little bit. Does that sound good to you?
Yep, good.
All right. So first question is, what accomplishment in your life are you most proud of?
The thing that gives me the absolute most pride is my two children. I don't think there's anything in life that tops it. And I mean, sometimes, if I feel even slightly tentative about something or something frightens me, I think, oh, I had kids, I'm going to be good. So it's the most best thing. Yes.
Yeah. I was just talking to Chris. Well, this show's coming out today, but I was talking to him earlier this week on pandemic parenting. And we were talking about how being a parent is like the most difficult job on the planet. So big respect.
Yeah, you never know what you're dealing with, truly. So I have a son who's 33, Sean, and a daughter, Candace, she's 28. And it's like watching a movie now. You never know what they're going to do next, so you sort of set them up in the script, but now it's entirely up to them where they go and what they do. It's fabulous.
Yeah, that's to keep you on your toes, huh?
Yeah.
All right. What would be your perfect vacation for you?
Oh, skiing down any slope. I'm not an advanced skier. I'm an intermediate skier, but yeah, to me, there's nothing more wonderful than that beautiful sense of rhythm coming down a mountain. I love it. That's my favorite.
Okay, I love snowboarding myself, but I've been to Australia. Do you have mountains and a lot of snow and stuff down there?
Yeah, we do. There's several ski resorts. So there's some in New South Wales, there's some in Victoria, and actually they're very modern. And a lot of the instructors from Europe come over here and spend the season teaching in our country as well. So we've got good skiing, and New Zealand, of course, has fabulous skiing down in Queenstown.
Okay, well, maybe I'll have to make a trip down there sometime.
You may.
All right. Who is your favorite musical artist?
Oh my goodness. Look, I have some very eclectic tastes. But yeah, maybe people like Adele. I really love her ballads. Yes, and I even love some rap music because I think it captures a lot of the thinking. I don't like rap music. There's some of it that's quite misogynistic. So yeah, give me a bit of rap, give me a bit of R&B, and I'm happy. Beyonce is one of my absolute heroes as well. Yeah.
That's awesome because, you know, like at first glance, I'd be like, oh, this is a person that doesn't really like rap. So that's why it always goes to show
I know.
never judge a book by its cover, right? Who is your biggest role model?
Yeah, so I mean, it had to be Nelson Mandela, given, you know, I have a South African background, and given his history, to come out and still try to unify a nation. And I truly wish that, you know, some of his aspirations were still being followed. I just think that was incredibly wise and incredibly courageous. And I loved when he came out, when he spoke about, you know, he quoted Marianne Wilkinson, I think her name is, to say, you know, who are we not to shine our light on the world? Not like who are we to do it, but who are we not to do it? I think he was remarkable.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. And you can't really see it, but that little below the Van Gogh, there's a little whiteboard on my wall. That's the Marianne Williamson quote about
Williamson, yes, there we go. That quote is, yeah, it's also usually where I am.
Amazing. All right, well, thank you very much. Now we'll get into the bulk of the interview here. So I'm just curious, tell me a little bit more about your journey to become an education consultant.
All right, well, Greg, I started off as a secondary teacher. And then my son Sean was born, and I thought I really wanted to know a little bit more about this young person, this entity that's entered our home, that Pierre and I were caring for. And so I retrained early childhood, and I just loved it. It's a very creative space. I love being around young children. You know, if you said to me, do I love young children? It's not really about the children and being with them per se because they're children, but I love the way they think. And I love offering them the opportunities to learn and to grow. So it was a really, I really, really loved that. And so I did it for a long time. And I was director of early learning for a decade at a private girls' school, although I had a co-education. I had boys in my centre. And then, when that came to an end, I was approached by Victoria Independent Schools Organisation to join them. And that's when I started working with more broadly with other teachers and and became an education consultant. And more recently, I've started my own consultancy, Kriegler-Education. And that's on the back of a book that I wrote, which really captures all my experiences with early childhood, and it's called Edu-Chameleon. So we know that the chameleon is a very adaptable creature. And so the book is really about offering educators different stances and different ways to be with young children.
That sounds amazing.
I
love working with children too. I just love their energy and just being around them and the way they think as well. They say like the craziest things sometimes. It's funny. So I definitely understand where you're coming from with that.
Yeah.
All right. Oh yeah, you told me this funny joke about a couple of fish swimming along in the water. And I was wondering if you could just tell everyone the joke and how it applies to communication.
Sure. So we have two young fish swimming along. Okay, we call one fin, we call one fillet, swimming along, and they encounter this older fish swimming in the opposite direction. The older fish says, "Good morning, boys. How's the water?" They wave, say they're fine, water's cool. Anyway, a few minutes later, Finn turns to Fillet. He says, "What the heck is water?" So this story is not mine originally. It's from David Foster Wallace, and he told it at a graduate speech at Kenyon College in the US. And what he's saying is that very often the things that are the most important to us, the things that mean most, are invisible to us. So, the fish didn't even realize that they were swimming in water, which sustains them. So one of these things that is generally invisible to us is the culture that we live in, So I love that story because I think it gets to the bottom of how culture is something that we often don't understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't really necessarily choose our culture. We're just kind of like born into one, and then we're raised in that culture. So we have all those cultures, like beliefs and structure. And so, yeah, it can take some work as an adult to really get awareness around all those beliefs.
Yes, that's what I would say to parents, culture isn't something default. It's not something you have to live out all the patterns from the past. It's really something you can create, something that you can be consciously aware of. And I encourage parents to embrace that power to create a beautiful family culture, or for educators to create a beautiful classroom culture.
Yeah, 100%. It's on us to create these cultures that we want in our lives, right?
Yeah.
All right, we'll pause for a moment for another Deep Thoughts with Greg. Culture. I really think culture is something that we take for granted very often. Sure, rationally we can be like, oh yeah, I'd be like a different person if I was born in a different culture. But you really got to slow down and really feel that. Like, yeah, I was born in the United States, but what if I was born to some Amazon tribe that doesn't have any technology and just like farming, hunting, gathering tribe? My life would be literally completely different. And especially in America, where one of our cultural traits is individualism, right? So like, I decide and I am in control of my future and I'm an individual and I decide my fate. And that's certainly true to an extent, but culture plays a huge role in America, and American culture plays a huge role in all the world. So like a perfect example in my own life is I used to think that I wanted to go to school and get good grades and become an engineer and then get a job and work for 40 years and retire and have a nice family and a house and all that stuff. And a lot of those things I do want, but I got the grades, I got the degree, and then when I got to the job, I was like, this isn't right. Like, I'm not enjoying this at all. Do I really want to do this for 40 years? And I started questioning that, and I realized that, whoa, like this whole like work behind a desk, work at a company thing isn't really for me. That was actually something culture had handed me. Like in American culture, the American dream, right, is to, like the middle class American dream is to get a job and buy a house and start a family, and you just work and you're a consumer and all that good stuff. Like that's America for you. But when I got to that point, I had to realize that, oh, that's not really what I wanted. That's something that my culture gave to me. And so then I went on this whole journey, and then I started Think&Evolve, and now I'm here talking to you on pandemic parenting, and none of that would have happened if I hadn't slowed down and really thought, how is my culture impacting me? And is this something that's really from me? Or is this something that my society, my culture is handing down to me? So take moments in your life, like, do I really believe this thing? Or is this just something that was told to me by my culture, by my family, by my school? And it can be tough sometimes to really get down to the nitty gritty and see like, what is it that I really believe? It takes a lot of work to really get down there and be like, what's the difference between my culture and what I believe? But in the end, it's really worth it, because then when I started Think&Evolve and living life like how I truly wanted to live it, everything really opened up for me and my life became exponentially better. So again, just like the fish swimming in water, we are walking through life in our own cultures. So it's important to slow down sometimes and take a moment and be like, notice the culture around us. All right, now Lili-Ann is going to start talking about all of the different communication styles from infancy all the way up to being a teenager. So let's jump back into it.
And speaking of just kind of like these invisible cultures that are around us, we were also talking a little bit about how not all communication is specifically verbal or even conscious, really. So I was wondering if you could just explain that a little bit more.
Yes, I think, one of the most important things that parents should realize is that it's often not what they say that impacts on children. Children imitate everything they do. So, how you talk to them. So clearly we are in a position of authority with children, but how do we enact that authority? Is it a kind of an overreaching, overarching, heavy-handed way, or are we just seeing it as responsibility and still respecting children's agency? Because it will come out. It'll come out in our voice. It'll come out in how we speak to them. It'll come out in the tone that we use, and it'll come out in also how we talk to other people in the world around us when our children are watching. So yeah, all kinds of gesture, tone, these things, children are responding to very subtle cues. There are lots of unsubtle ones. And I mean, very often we talk to children in a way we would never speak to other adults. And, there's a lot to be said for just being aware of your child as another person, not as your child. That goes a long way.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Viewing them as just like another person instead of it's like my child. That could, I think, maybe change the perspective around and give a little more space to see things that maybe you didn't see before. So communicating with your child is obviously very important, and then we communicate with people in invisible ways, often unconscious ways sometimes. And so there's like different ways you can communicate with people depending on their age, all the way starting from birth even, right? So I was wondering if you could share some ways that parents could communicate with their newborn kids that don't even have verbal ability yet. They can't even speak anything. So what are some ways they can communicate?
Yeah, now with babies, I think having an awareness that you still have to talk to them, but your words are a bit more like music now. You get the lyrics and you get the music, so they can hear the tone, and they know from the sound of your voice, but also from your eye contact with them and the way you hold and touch them, whether they are valued, and they will be responding to that. So if you are responding to their needs, then they feel valued and they feel like at least they have some control of the world around them. But the eye contact is really very, very important. And I know, and I'm guilty of this myself, we are on our devices a lot of the time. So we're finding that even when mums are feeding or when they walking with their very young infants, that they might be distracted. So that very early eye contact is crucial for young babies. And also finding out who your baby is. We don't have a communication package fully formed for this child. So we don't know what is the best way to speak to them, how much patience they have. So we need to learn about who our babies are, and then we'll be able to choose our words and choose our actions and choose how we interact with them, and develop their patience slowly, not rush into it. So there are some skills for working with very young children, and you want to try as hard as you can to create a routine, but make it loving, you know, and give them the sense that they are important. They can't think to themselves, I am important, but they know it.
Mm. Yeah, they can feel it.
They feel it. Yep.
And that's, I was just curious, and I'm not actually a parent myself, but just the way when you were talking, something popped into my head. Like, do you find that, even newborn babies, they have their own kind of personality and disposition right away, just like right off the bat?
Absolutely. You will never have the same two babies in the world. They absolutely do have their personality from very early on. And, any parent will tell you that their children are very different from one another.
Yeah, that's why I think, I feel like you could read every single parenting book out there, but when the time actually comes, you're going to have to adjust because every kid's going to be different, even from the very beginning.
Yes, that's true. It's true. And I mean, we're jumping ahead to when children are a bit older, but the one thing you don't want to do is compare them negatively to one another, and especially to talk about that in front of other parents. I often hear parents say, oh, Stella is our mathematician and Joe is our something else. There's this thing called the Pygmalion effect, and it's been proved in the classroom by some chaps called Jacobson. Oh my goodness, I've forgotten his name, but yeah, Jacobson was the most important one, and they discovered that actually children and students behave according to what we expect from them. So they had an experiment in a school which they called the Oak School, an elementary school, and they tested all the children's IQ, and then they told some of the teachers that these children, about 20 of them, were really going to develop well and grow well. And of course, those children did. But it had nothing to do with their IQ because they were selected randomly. And so it was how the teachers had set up the way they communicated that resulted in those children. They gave them a bit more attention and had better expectations.
But yeah, I think that's very interesting. I don't think I ever heard that it called the Pygmalion effect before, but I just know as an educator, when I work with students, like I come in with the absolute belief that every one of my students is capable of learning what I'm teaching or whatever they're learning in school at the time. And it doesn't matter if they have ADHD or autism or dyslexia. Like, it may mean they'll have to work harder, find alternate strategies to learn the material, but I don't believe that they're incapable of learning. And I hope that I give them the Pygmalion effect of you can do it, you can get there if you put in the effort and you try.
Absolutely. No, you're right. And there's an Israeli professor, Reuven Feuerstein, and he believed that what you needed to find was just that island of what he called it normality. So if you say dyslexia or autism or whatever it might be, he would have a lolly in his pocket, and if he crinkled the wrapper, he would actually gain the attention of a child that had given no other attention, but he called this a gateway or an opening. And so there's always a way to reach children, and that's our role is to find that. But I love your contention that all children are open to learning. And yeah, I wish, that every educator had that same sense, because with our unsubtle and subtle body language and communication, we often switch children off. And this happens in different cultures, and it happens across gender. And our unconscious biases do get transmitted. along with our beliefs about what children are capable of.
100%.
So Lili-Ann and I were talking about how to communicate with infants, and then we got a little sidetracked, but that's okay because our discussion was really centered around children and how impactful our words and actions can be, especially in their formative years. And I, for one, am very careful with labels because I'm a big believer that words create our reality. And so if you tell your kid and you label them with, say, like, you have ADHD, you have dyslexia, you have XYZ disability, well, that becomes part of them. They absorb that, and like all the weight that goes along with having, say, like ADHD gets absorbed into the kids as well. So I would never want to implant that in my students and get them thinking, well, oh, I have like a learning disability. Can I really learn as well as other people? So I'm very careful with like labeling things. And that doesn't mean that like if your kid's struggling with reading or struggling with sitting still, like to just ignore the problem and not go get it diagnosed. Like obviously go get it diagnosed and get the proper treatment from a professional. But just be very careful about what you feed your kids, what labels you feed your kids, because those labels could potentially come with subtle limitations that we don't even realize that are part of that particular label. So just for me, I'm very particular about labeling things, and it's so easy to do because that's what humans do. We always want to categorize, we want to label, we want to separate things. But I usually just, personally, for me, with my students, I'm always just letting them do their thing, however they're going to do it. And then it's my job to just intercede and try and help them the best that I can without labeling or saying anything in particular about this is how you are. So just let them be and let them grow and hope for the best. And now let's get back to Lili-Ann. She's going to start sharing about how to communicate with toddlers and then preschoolers and then school-age children and teenagers. So we're going to hit all the age ranges as we go along here, and you don't want to miss it.
So we talked a little bit about, talking to newborns and infants. So we'll just keep kind of going up the ladder here.
Okay, sure.
Like toddlers, young children. So is there any specific strategy for parents for that age range?
Toddlers are really discovering the world. So from 2 to 3 years old, they're beginning to talk, but there's a distinct difference now between their receptive language and their expressive language. So toddlers are starting to really understand what's happening around them, but they still aren't able to articulate or verbalize very well. But I mean, if you're peeling an apple at the bench in your kitchen, that toddler is understanding that you're not doing that for random reasons. You're not going to be taking it out and feeding it to the birds. So they're starting to understand through observation that not only what things are called, so they might know now this is an apple, but they're also starting to interpret what's going on around them. And so if we're aware of that, we can be explaining or showing or demonstrating things so that they gain a greater understanding of all these things that they're witnessing around them. So they know you're going to give them that apple, and they're going to have to sit still and eat it, so that because you're going to tell them, if you don't sit still, you'll choke on the apple. So they really are. So knowing that they are learning, gaining this information, even though they're not speaking a lot, is very important for toddlers. And, you've all heard about the terrible twos, right?
I've heard of it.
Children, they know what they want and they know when they want it, and that is now. So, we can remonstrate with them or expect them to show some logic, but logic is not big in the toddlerhood. So it's more about concentrating on the here and now, what they can see, what they can touch, not trying to give them some, you know, a lot of the time you think they can understand what a promise is. You promised me that you wouldn't do this or that. But the child doesn't realize this is some future contract that they've entered into with you. They don't know what a promise means. So you logically think they're just defying you, but they're not. They're just acting out. So one of the things to do is, make something else the arbiter. So if they want to go to bed a little bit later or something like that, you can show them a clock, and you can show them the clock is going to, this hand is going to move. I don't know if they still have those kind of clocks, or it'll look like this. And then the clock becomes the arbiter, not you. And it just dispels that kind of, that you against the toddler kind of situation. And being aware of establishing routines and patterns so that they genuinely know what to expect goes a long way to communicating with children who, emotional. They experience everything just as a big ball of emotion. So yeah, that's my advice for that.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, because I know when I'm communicating with other people, and not just kids, but really anyone in general, it's like I have my beliefs, my worldview, my, reality, and then I'm communicating with someone assuming that they're on board with my reality and maybe this way or that way, and that's not always the case, right? And that's how we can get into arguments or miscommunications. So,
correct.
Yeah, I think this idea to you say toddlers are very present in the here and now, so using stuff that's present here and now instead of some sort of future binding contract is probably a good way to go about it. All right, so that was toddlers. And what's the age range on toddlers approximately?
Toddlers are around 2 to 3. Once children get to preschool, a lot of children will have been in long day care from 6 months onwards, but they still called toddlers at that stage. Preschool, kindergarten, when children are 3 to about 5, I would call them preschoolers.
Okay.
And now their language is really developing exponentially. So, we can really share vocabulary with them. And what I love parents to think about at this age is that, we go around the world understanding the logic between different things. But young preschool children may not necessarily understand that. One of the examples I give is, if you told the children that you're going to go out shopping to get groceries and it starts to rain outside and you change your mind. So you stick your head around a corner and say, we're not going anymore, carry on playing. That's one thing. But if you stick your head around the doorway and say, hey guys, we were going to go shopping. Have a look outside. Do you see it is bucketing down rain? If we go out now, we are going to be soaked to the skin. Now, I think we're going to go in 1 hour's time. What do you think? Is that a good plan? You can hear in that the inclusiveness. You're not just telling, but also all this information, the reason why you've decided not to go out at that time, the reason, and then, asking them their opinion. There's just, and it takes hardly 2 seconds longer to say all that. But just to be conscious that what you've also done is given them this invisible logic between your actions. And same when you're baking a cake. You can say, I'm adding eggs. We're having 2 eggs. And that's fine. That's good information. But if you say that, eggs are a bit like glue. They bind this cake together. When it comes out the oven and we take it out the pan, it's going to stand up like a cake. And that's the eggs. Eggs are doing that. Again, it just gives them new understandings. And so you're not just building language, which you are, vocabulary, but also these beautiful logical connections between things. And so they become better thinkers if we are thinking out loud around them, and just giving them this kind of
relational structure between different things in the world. Yep, I think that's, and the other thing with preschoolers, and this is a theme that goes from here onwards, is you want very much to start to develop their interests. Taking them to the library to take out books that might interest them, or reading with them, watching films with them, and if they're lucky enough, taking them out on excursions, going to the zoo or the aquarium. They might suddenly fall in love with tortoises, or they see the diver feeding the sharks, or whatever it might be. It sparks an interest, and it starts to show them that these are some of the things people do in the world. Some people care for animals. These crazy tortoises have got shells. So, developing those interests. I'm a great believer that everyone in the world has a purpose, and we have to find it. And this doesn't happen overnight when you're an adolescent and you have to choose your career. This is something which is being developed minute by minute through our experiences and what we're exposed to. So this is the beginning of it, and you really need to carry it on as the children get older.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's a interesting idea to kind of like just be like narrating your life out loud, or narrating your thought process as you go along, so preschoolers can understand. Because once again, it's one of those like hidden things. It's like it seems so simplistic and basic to me that I just assume that maybe this child should understand that, okay, we're not going to go because it's raining outside, but to actually sit there and say, hey, we're not going to go because it's raining, we're going to go now, or what do you think? Like you said, it's inclusive, but it also makes that connection. So yeah, I never thought about that before, but that's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it's something that parents can do that is really simple all the time. That helps with their maths and their science. If you go even pumping up the tires at a service station, when you get them to have a look at the units, KPA or whatever they are, measuring things, there's hundreds and hundreds of things you can do at home to make your kids smarter, really.
That's fantastic. So hopefully when I have kids one day, I feel like that's what I'm going to be doing now.
I think you're going to have great kids. Great. And I think you're going to be a great dad.
I think so too. I'm certainly learning a lot, just like interviewing people like yourself and everyone else on the show.
So when we're communicating with these younger kids, like toddlers 2 to 3, or even preschoolers like 3 to 5, 6 range, they really don't have their full language capabilities yet, obviously. And they really don't have that logical side built in either. So I think it'd be like you tell your kid, don't eat that cookie, and then they eat the cookie and you're like, well, why did you eat the cookie? I told you not to eat the cookie. But they don't really understand, they don't have that logic built in that, like, if I disobey, then mom or dad will get upset with me. And they don't really have that, understand that like future binding contract scenario yet. It's just everything is here and now. And also I really like what Lili-Ann said about just this kind of like idea of narrating your own life, right? So like you're just like, if you're around your kids, you're like, all right, I'm gonna take a shower today because I don't want to smell bad, and I want everyone else to think that I'm a stinky person that doesn't have good hygiene. Or you're like cooking and you're like, well, we're going to have pasta and spaghetti, and I'm going to have spinach because that's healthy, and we're going to have pasta because it's cheap or something. And like, how does the pasta work? Well, we're going to cook it till it gets soft, because then it's easier to eat. So we have to cook it. Otherwise it gets crunchy and hard and it's not very good. So just like explaining the thought process of why you do every little single thing can be really impactful and help kids build that logical side of their brain. And then like Lili-Ann said, I'm an engineer and math person, and that's everything really all math is about, like that logical thinking thinking, all right, how do these things go together? How does everything fit? Where are the patterns? So if you can build that into your kids when they're toddlers or even preschoolers, very young, you can really set them up for a nice, awesome life as an engineer. All right, so now we're going to move into like where kids have more of language capabilities when they're school age and then eventually teenagers. So we're going to wrap up with Lili-Ann sharing some communication styles. When the kids are a little older, they understand logic a little more and they can actually use their words.
So now the preschoolers are going into primary school. So what's the age range on that, and how can parents kind of shift their communication styles for that type of child?
Look, now at school, when kids get to school, I think we really are tempted as parents to just hand them over. Now it's up to you, teacher, you do it. I believe personally that we are always our children's primary educator. And clearly we're not going to know all the maths or the geography or the science, but we can still tap into how successful are they in integrating their academics? How are they coping socially? How are they emotionally? So we need to stay aware of all of those things. You know, when children get to school, their world is expanding and they're becoming exposed to a lot of different things, and not all of it is positive, trust me. They could be being bullied, they could be learning bad habits, they could be learning to be disrespectful. And I believe that everyone needs to be respectful, not just children. You know, on Facebook, you often get this thing that comes across, what do teenagers need today? And everyone says, oh, they need manners and they need this and they need respect. They need to be listened to. They need to be understood. And this is, you know, what we are doing for children when they're at school. My mum, you know, she'd go down to the school and raise Cain if she felt like we weren't being treated fairly. Sometimes it was embarrassing, but you knew she had your back. You knew it. She was the I have person for me, and I can person. She said, you can do it. I have your back. And we need to do that still when kids get to school. And still to try and develop their interests. You know, I'm friends with a great drama teacher, Dr. Kathleen Buchanan, and she says that the interests are about the knowledge that they have, that they're developing around things, but more it's about their self-esteem. I am the person who knows this. I am the expert. And, you know, so ensuring that your children have that self-esteem and that they are building their knowledge once they get to school, I think it's really important to just tap in there. Yep.
Gotcha. All right. Yeah, it's like, I feel like, again, it would be tempting, you know, you've raised this kid, and this, you know, young children require lots of attention, right? Lots of attention. And then they're getting to school age and they're becoming a little more independent. And it would seem easy to just be kind of like, all right, you guys have them, you know, and I did my job, and like, you guys are doing the education now. So, but it is important to just really stay connected, and like you said, you are the primary educator for your kid for their whole.
Yes, and you know, they might not find at school everything they need. Primary school children, for instance, outside of the classroom, you know, there might be sports provided. I'm not 100% sure where you are, but a lot of the time we ignore the stuff like, say, the skateboarding, or the rollerblading, or all those sorts of things. But actually, again, that's something that might be a hobby that turns into a lifelong interest, or, you know, they might end at the Olympics, you never know. So taking account of what is just outside of school as well is really important. Showing an interest, I think, turning up. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So then, like, the last stage is another school age. So now you're getting into tweens tweens and teenage years, so the final stage before they become adults, and they're hormonal and they're crazy. So what can I do?
I know. Look, a lot of the time, they're going to turn their back on you now. And they won't want to talk to you. In fact, you'll be the last person they want to talk to. You know, they don't want to be seen dead speaking to you outside of school or college or wherever it is. But really, they have to part from you. And in some ways, when they are working out who they are, and it's not always easy, because your family is a safe place, hopefully for them, a safe place, they often act out with you. And I think if we can just take our helicopter up 100 meters and see this isn't personal, this is them testing out in a safe space who they are. But I think we still want to try and keep tabs, you know, on who are their friends, where are they going at night, and just being open to listening to them when we can. But there are lots of hard conversations you have to have with tweens and teens. They are going to be exposed, you know, to all kinds of things. You know, there's the drugs, the internet, the everyone telling them what their body shape should be, you know, what gender they need to express, how they need to express it. There's so many things. And I mean, the less open-minded we are about it, I suppose the more difficult it's going to be. So through time, opening up perspectives and giving them ideas about how other people think from early on can help at this stage. If they see that you've been a bit, you know, open-minded along the way, they might remain more open to you. So, you know, trying your best to keep that relationship. I call it a golden thread.
Okay.
And, you know, when they're little, the golden thread is nice, it's visible, it's nice and fat, and you can see it. I tell you what, it can stretch very thin. Believe me, I know. But as long as you feel the tug, as long as it's there, you're going to be okay. The one thing you don't want to do is have that golden thread break. So you can let it get very thin, but just know it's there. That's the important thing. But they need space. And what you can do is give them space in the home, you know, give them some control over their room. And again, when you're setting rules, try and do it in a way that gives them space in the rule making as well. You know, sometimes you'll give a curfew and it's got to be midnight and you've got to be home at midnight. But what you might find actually is one of two things. All their friends have a curfew of 1 a.m. And so they're the odd one out. How do they get home without their friends? That's the one thing. And the other thing is maybe they're the most responsible person in that group. And if they're not there, everyone else is going to get in trouble. How do you know? So giving them the space in the rule making, you know, makes it less of a battle. But I mean, always going to expect a bit of a battle from tweens and teens. You know, you think about James Dean and you think about every other adolescent out there. But then again, it's a time to absolutely cherish, because it is the last bit of time you have them in your home. And yeah, appreciate it, you know, just stand back sometimes and watch and see, because sometimes they'll surprise you with just the joy and the energy that they bring to the world and the quirkiness and the humor. Oh my gosh, I tell you what, I've been on the floor laughing sometimes when I hear what my son calls us parental unit 1 and 2.
That's such a teenager thing to say.
Absolutely.
I love that. There's so much great advice in there. But the thing I think my favorite thing you said was like, don't take the rebellion personally. Because I just had like a thought, you know, I was just tutoring last night, and she's 16 now, and she's sharing with me how her parents are ruining her life and all that stuff. And I started thinking about, you know, me as a teenager, and I shared with her a story how like whenever I go out, I used to live where it kind of got pretty cold, where it even snow and stuff. And then my mom would be like, make sure you grab a jacket. And I'd be like, nope, I'm fine. And she's like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, I'm sure. And then we'd be out and it'd be freezing. My lips would be purple and I'd be like shivering. And they're like, sure you don't need a jacket? I'm like, nope, I don't need one. And then like now I'm like, why did I do that? But I think I was just, I was just being rebellious. I was just trying.
Yeah, just because she said so. How dare she say?
Exactly. So, yeah, I wasn't trying to be like malicious or towards my parents or anything, but I was just a little bit of a rebellion. All right. Well, thank you, Lili-Ann, so much. That was just chock full of just really great advice for all stages of childhood there and how to communicate with your kids. I'm wondering,
Yes.
do you have any just additional books or websites or apps that you think parents might be able to use to explore this topic a little bit further if they'd like?
I don't have anything specific, but I've just written a new book, and it's not published yet. It's called Roots and Wings. So you're giving your children roots and wings. And what I found is no matter what I wanted to research, there is great advice on the internet. So seriously, if you think, an eating disorder is something you have to take account of, or if you feel, and parents know, if you feel that your child has some special need, plug it in and then sift. Don't take the first advice. You will know, you will see from the quality of what is written. So I don't have any specific advice because I just think there's so much. There's brilliant advice about where to have hard conversations with your children, walk with them, sit in a car. So the advice is out there, but my advice is trust your instinct. You know your children. So give them a great vocabulary, give them some understanding of how the world works, develop their perspective so they understand other people as well, and then back them all the way. But trust that probably know what is best for them. So yeah,
that's beautiful.
Go lightly, go happily.
And of course, check out her book, Edu-Chameleon, right?
Edu-Chameleon, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Greg. I've loved this interview with you.
Yeah.
And I wish you the greatest luck with everything that you do.
Thank you.
You're being a great positive force for the planet.
I'm trying out here. But real quick before we go, like if anyone wanted to find you, do you have like an Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or website that you'd like to share?
Yeah, the best website to get me is my Kriegler-Education, Kriegler -education. So it's simple. It's www.kriegler-education.com. And there's the opportunity there to write to me or to check out my blogs, which are on Authory. So all of my articles and things are on there. So that's the easiest way. Write to me. I love hearing from people.
Okay. Awesome. Keep it simple.
Yes.
Well, so I appreciate the kind words. And once again, thank you so much for coming on. It was just a great wealth of knowledge that you shared. So really appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. Keep well.
Till next time.
Till next time. Bye-bye.
All right. Now it's time for the wrap up recap. So today, Lili-Ann and I talked about communication styles with your kids at various stages. So when they're very young, when they're babies and toddlers, and even in preschool, it's much more about the emotional tone and the things you do, because the kids aren't just listening to the things you say. Kids are also watching the things you do. They're watching how you treat them, and they're watching you treat other people. So it's a lot more about those subtle behavior shifts and how we behave day to day that communicates a lot of stuff to especially younger children. And I really love the idea of just like kind of narrating your life to help them build that logical thinking part of their brain. And then as they get older and they become school age and teenagers, it's really good and a great way to stay connected to just like expose them to a lot of experiences. Go on excursions with them, take them to the aquarium, take them to the beach, take them to a science exhibit, movies, theater, opera, whatever. Like just like try a whole bunch of stuff. You'll never really know what they might end up really falling in love with, and then it could, like Lili-Ann was saying, become a hobby. Like skateboarding could become a professional career, like a Tony Hawk. Who knows? You never know. Or like a YouTube personality. Like that's a thing that people can do these days. So maybe they start by making silly videos, and then all of a sudden that's how they make a living. And so yeah, you really want to stoke those passions, and it's a great way to stay connected with your kids as they get older and older and they start turning more into adults. And then the last thing that I really like Lili-Ann said that I mentioned at the end there was, don't take that like rebellious teenager attitude personally. Sure, they're going to be defiant and they're going to be grumpy, and I work with several teenagers right now, and like they're always moody and they're like, my parents this and the parents that. But it's actually a beautiful thing because they feel safe enough to explore that identity and be defiant with you because you've created a safe place. So that's actually a compliment in a certain way, all that moodiness. So it was a great episode. Lili-Ann shared a lot of great information. And of course, if you want to check out more of her stuff, all of the links will be in the description of the video. Thank you again for joining us on Pandemic Parenting. We will see you next week.